Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we're going to be talking about 2010's Ticked-Off Trannies with Knives, directed by Israel Luna, and starring Krystal Summers, Kelexis Davenport, Willam Bell, and Tom Zembrod. Ticked-Off Trannies with Knives follows a group of trans women who decide to go out to the club after a night of work. The women each have their own distinct personalities and, despite their differences, will do anything to protect each other. This sense of loyalty is put to the test when a man who assaulted one of them decides to come back for more. After a gruesome attack, the women decide to take their own sense of revenge, with their own sense of style, of course. Following in the tradition of 70s grindhouse films, revenge horror, a little Tarantino, and a lot of laughs, Ticked-Off Trannies is a low-budget thriller that lives up to its title. Also joining me tonight is my special co-host, Jenna Dixon. Thanks everybody for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Thank you, Zena Dixon, for joining me tonight to talk about Ticked-Off Trannies with Knives.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to talk about this movie.
Me too, especially because we've had a little bit of time between episodes, and I missed you like crazy, so I am happy to finally get to, with all the craziness in our lives personally as well as externally, it's nice for a movie like Ticked-Off Trannies with Knives that is silly, but definitely has an emotional truth to it. I think it appeals to the horror fan, that sort of grindhouse, Quentin Tarantino feel. But like I was saying to you beforehand, like a drag queen, the movie itself is very resourceful and takes whatever it can to make it work. Like this movie, they'll do a scene where you have a guy who's like, I'm about to do this move where I do a flip and I float through the air and do a backflip back. But then what happens is right when he's about to do it, it cuts, but it's part of the style of the movie, like
Right.
missing reel and stuff, which at the time, I don't know if you were a fan of them. I saw them in the theater when they did the Grindhouse double feature with Planet Terror and Death Proof. It was definitely, that was the style at that time. This movie came out right after that. And I just I was at Netflix one night. I wasn't sure what I wanted to watch. I think it was one of the categories of like new LGBT movies, and one of the first ones to pop up was Ticked-Off Trannies with Knives. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm watching that. I'm 100% watching that. And I like it. I loved it actually. But I like all kinds of different, like the drag queen sort of subgenre of film, whether it's a drama, horror. With this one, they're supposed to be men who are pretending to be women, unlike some other ones, like where we talked about Psycho Beach Party with Charles Bush, where he's playing, a woman, like an authentic biological woman, even though he's clearly a man.
Right.
And I mean no offense to Charles Bush, because I think he would take offense with me saying that you're really a man, especially because he does play the role beautifully.
He really
And this
is.
one, and there was another one at the time when this one came out called like Girls Will Be Girls, which also was like they're supposed to be playing like women, like the one has a child. And so I really enjoyed this one because they were actual drag queens, but they would say lines like, oh, she couldn't show up because she had an abortion. Obviously, she didn't have an abortion, or I just the humor of this movie, even from the names, Tipper Some More, Emigration, Rachel Slur, they're all so, and the drag queen sense of humor, in my opinion, it works on a way that might not work with a normal, with normal humor that you would see on film, in terms of like the stuff some of them were saying that are horribly offensive, but they almost get away with it because they are themselves a minority, or they themselves are, you know, they take the sort of bravado, and with that bravado, they're able to like make the sort of jokes or humor that I might normally be like, I'm turning this off. Instead, it cracks
Right.
me up. But Zena, tell me, what were your initial impressions of Ticked-Off Trannies with Knives?
Well, again, I love this movie. I thought that it was such a blast, and I found that I actually watched it twice since you told me about it because I thought it was just fun and just again with everything that's going on in the world, like sometimes you just need like silly fun, like a
Yeah.
movie that doesn't take itself too seriously. And on top of that, first off, the title is like
Genius.
amazing. I love it. It made
Yeah.
me want to watch it. And I've never watched a movie like this before. It's not even on purpose. It's just like before you told me about it, I've never heard of it. So the fact that when you told me about it, I was already hooked by the name automatically.
Yeah.
I felt that it's just a very, like, I love the fact, again, which you spoke about, how kind of make fun of like certain situations. I don't want to give away too much, but it is like a grindhouse style, like revenge exploitation. And going in, you don't think that at first. At least I know I didn't. And then from the start, like, Pinky has to be my favorite because there was a couple of scenes where I found myself like literally laughing out loud, and it's just like, honestly, I feel like this is my humor. Like,
Yeah.
I do. It's my humor. These are my people. Like, I wanted to be in their world. I wanted to hang out with them. And doesn't it seem like when they were out hanging out after they
Yeah.
got from work and stuff, that seems like such a good time. I want to go out and I want to dance, you know?
Yeah, or like when they're doing back and forth, like the true colors, like, oh, I see your true colors. Oh, they're really shining. Like that sort of, me too. That's my kind of when I'm hanging out with friends, just being goofy. But also, you always, they're real people. Like you have Rachel, who, she's not going to go out with just one alone because she's like, well, I don't really know you. But yeah,
Right.
with the group, it'd be easier. It's like, even though she's like being offensive, there's a truth to it. Like, yeah, I don't know you well enough to go out with you by yourself. But with a group, sure, I could do it. Like they're authentic to themselves. You have like Mama. I believe that she's the type of woman who she's going to completely embrace everybody and hold you together. But if you mess
Yes,
with one of her girls, she's going to cut you with a knife.
I believe it.
And, and that's not giving anything away to this film. That's just, I think part of how she is. But yeah, like you said, well, it's the grindhouse feel, but yeah, like Savage, it's got that little bit of Savage Streets, like we talked about with Linda Blair, or the I Spit on Your Grave sort of
Yes,
revenge
yes.
horror. It's got all of that, and I think that it pulls it off well. It does all the sort of like tropes, the themes, the ideas of like you've got the sort of hillbilly or the no, redneck. I think he's more of a redneck guy, and he's so annoying. But when you think about it, like the actor did a really good job. He definitely had that sort of he got the character. And that's what I also like about it, is because like the acting in it is not like Meryl Streep caliber,
Right.
but it's super fun. I mean, who cares? It's not trying to be anything
Exactly.
more than entertainment for
Exactly.
horror fans, for the LGBT community,
Mm-hmm.
for actions, the action part of it, it's got that sort of almost I keep referencing like the grindhouse film, but it reminded me actually initially a lot of Kill Bill at the time,
Right.
sort of like going through this training. And yeah, the opening sequence pulls you right in.
Mm-hmm.
The whole atmosphere at the club, but then when they go out to the club, there's just so much I love about it. But what did you think about, like, so you said Pinky was your favorite?
Yes.
Yeah, I gotta
Well,
say, I mean,
the
well,
reason why there's
why?
this particular scene, I'm sorry, because I'm just still thinking about. There's a particular scene that really just kind of like just made me like laugh so hard, because it's just like, what do you do if you say, if you have a friend that's like this, you can't do anything, just let them, let her be her, so basically it was the scene when they were in the club. Well, it's not a spoiler, but she received a call from Bubbles and they were leaving to go
Yeah,
outside.
yeah.
And she asked this girl, like, oh, am I in your am I in your way?
Right, right. Or when she knocks over the drinks and she's like,
Right.
I'm not paying for that.
And that's what I'm reading. Somebody just before that, somebody gave her a compliment, like, oh, where did you get your bag? Ross. So
Oh, there are so many lines. Like when Rachel finishes her set, she's like, they threw quarters at me. Oh no, there's so many. Oh, or I love when they're in the doctor's office. So the movie's kind of split up into three parts. There's the act that happens, the sort of like transition training, and then the revenge. But it's right at the beginning where, and mind you, you have no idea who, all of them could have very well died. So you're not sure who's, I remember the first time I watched this, I'm like, well, wait, who's going to survive to finish this movie? So I was like pleased to see that yes, it was Bubbles, Pinky, and Rachel, because I felt like that sort of combination, like when Bubbles is like, they go into there and Rachel's pulling all this stuff out of her purse, and Bubbles is or Pinky's like, what trash, but they're in the office, they're in the doctor's office, and then that sort of like kooky nurse comes in that they clearly are like having some sort of like weird envy about, and she's like, the doctor's gonna be right with you, and Rachel's like, oh, good. We'll deter to him then because he has a degree. Like, the humor in it. It is so funny. But also there are the thrills. It's not like terrifying, but like the whole Marco Polo sequence where he's chasing Bubbles, who had the lisp at the end of the second half of the movie. I have a lisp. I just want a sandwich.
It was just ridiculous.
Right, it's over the top ridiculous. But even when she's like running through the sort of, I don't know, the warehouse sort of thing, like it's genuinely the first time I watched it, I was nervous for her. She had evoked enough like empathy from me that I'm like, oh, what's gonna happen? All of the characters, even though you kind of have a feeling how things are gonna go, it's just enough off kilter that it keeps you on your toes. But then with the finale, I mean, I genuinely was nervous. Like they pulled it off where you're like, wait a minute, who is going to kind of come out of this? Oh, but their revenge. What did you think we'll try and not give too many spoilers away, I guess, then in this one. But like, what did you think about the revenge?
I loved it. I think that it was worth it. Even just like the way it transitioned, not what I thought, but in a good way. I did like the whole little gag where it's like, oh, a reel is lost, and it's just like, oh, come on, And even taking a step back, I loved that scene when Bubbles was running through the warehouse, and it was thrilling. It was thrilling to watch, and even though you just first met these characters, you're rooting for them. You wanted them to win. You felt bad for them. It's like, like friends just going someplace, and it's just like there's that one friend that doesn't want to go, and it's like it's heartbreaking because everything that goes on, but at the same time, it's, even though it's like entertaining and it's funny, it to me, that particular scene, like I could see that. I mean, minus the dialogue leading up to it, I think you know what I'm talking about. But with what Rachel said before they went in.
For sure. Well, yeah, she's I can't paraphrase it, but yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
Yes.
She didn't want her to ruin that for her.
Correct.
So, it's like the mixture of the action, the raunchiness, like friends just having a good time. Yeah. Like there's thrills in there. I just had such a blast with this movie, but I'm sorry, I just went off on a different road.
No, but it's great. I love it. I'm so glad that you had such a good reaction to it, because I think other people will too.
I think so too. I really, really do. Did I answer your question though? I'm sorry.
The revenge, just in general though, do you think that the movie, that it paid off in the end? Like, were you like, yes? Yeah,
absolutely. I agree. It was so worth it. I love even the scene with the knives. Like, I was wondering, like, okay, where are the knives? So it was perfect.
Yeah, I liked it. Yeah, because it stayed true to the rest of the movie. Like, even with this sort of like, they've done this training and they're now gonna kick some ass. In the end, they still though, like, by a string managed to win. Only because she was supposed to leave the window open, but she forgot to leave the window open. But the guys left the window open, so the other ones was able to get through the window. Like, stuff like that. It's still like the humor is still happening, even when you're genuinely invested in the thrills. But yeah, I'm a big fan of these sort of movies, like like I said, I enjoy when it's the drag queen sort of persona of this is like Charles Busch, where he's playing a real woman, or where it's the sort of adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, Tu Wong Fu, or Ticked-Off Trannies with Knives, where these are guys playing women. And I mean, I'm pretty sure most of them are drag queens in real life, which definitely lent itself a certain degree of authenticity, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't know that they're all, I've seen whoever the actress is that plays Rachel Slura, I know I've seen her in a few other things, and she's been the same. Oh, I think she was in Nip Tuck, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, you know, she definitely has ridden that ride, so to speak. And I'm glad that there's like a niche for this, because I don't, you know, this isn't a movie that I think could have been made even 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
But I love that it was made. And I think like if people haven't seen this, and I know that this sounds like a commercial for it, but I mean, I think if people haven't seen this, they 100% should check it out, especially if you like that sort of
Yeah.
almost homemade quality of film, the low budget, you know, the very clearly low budget, but they make it work. And if you, you know, if you enjoy revenge horror, or the sort of grindhouse Quentin Tarantino film, or all those, I think it fits nicely along with that, you know?
Perfect. Like I agree with you 100%. And it's just like, again, like I went into the movie blind, you know, and I just genuinely had like such a great time with it. And it's like, even though it is low budget, it kept my attention the entire time. And
Yeah,
sometimes in movies that have the most highest budget, it's not able to do that. You know, sometimes some movies they're not meant for you. But you know, there's action, there's comedy, there's drama, you know, again, kind of like piggybacking off of what you said, if you love like the grindhouse or 1970s horror,
yeah,
you know, horror movies, action movies with well, not so much horror, just a hint of horror here and there.
sure,
Um,
for sure.
you know, I think that this is for you. Like seriously, I feel like this movie should be a cult classic, and I feel like it will be. Like if
Yeah.
it's not already.
Yeah, because I mean, it's genuinely funny. Like, you know, we've discussed many times how much you and I enjoy comedy in
Yes.
horror as much as we do just straight laced horror. And I think that, you know, I don't think that you necessarily have to be one who went out to the gay clubs or hung out with a lot of drag queens to get this humor. It
Right.
certainly helps. But I mean, like you said, this was a fun group. It does make you want to go grab a drink with a friend. I
Yes.
think this movie, you know, it's one of those movies that you will sit and watch with your friends repeatedly, and then you'll have a lot of one-liners that kind of like instantly make you laugh. Because that's part of the drag queen persona. It's larger than life. It is being able to make these sarcastic comments and then feeling like, I don't know, like Grant, like we've said again, with Pinky being like, I'm not picking those up. You know, as she's walking like, girl, thank you so much. Oh, it's good to see you. Bam, I'm not picking that up. I mean, it's funny. I mean, there's so many funny things.
Right.
But you know, and just even with the performances, like Bubbles, she is you know, she is the damsel in distress. You
Cheers.
know, Pinky or Mama, she is the one who is sort of the matriarch of the group. And you also have like sort of the offbeat aunt, or the crazy aunt, which is Rachel, who's like making the sort of comments, a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of like condescension. And you know, I would have been happy with any combination of anybody who would have survived from the beginning of the movie.
Hey.
Um, but I also, like I said, I just, now that I've seen this movie more than a couple times, I'm so glad that it's like these three, because you have these, like, it's the best part of drag queens. You have that sort of competitiveness with each other, but also a family, a sense of
Mhm.
community, a sense of like, okay, we might not get along on Tuesday, but Wednesday night I got your back. You know,
Right.
it's got
Absolutely.
that sort of quality. But yeah, just a fun ride. I mean, it's not one of those movies that I think you can have a lot of in-depth analysis about. Other than, you know, if you want to come at it from an academic standpoint, I would say that, you know, it's a movie that's subverting the expectations of these actiony horror drama movies,
Mhm.
but also at the same time it's playing homage to it. You know, it's playing homage and it's subverting it at the same time, where we're showing respect to these movies, but also, hey, let's do this in a different way. And it's not like I just want there to go ahead and then be a whole bunch of drag queen movies that remake all these sort of movies. But if they're done well in a way that I think Ticked-Off Trannies with Knives was done, then yeah, I hope that there's going to be even more of these. And even though I think it came out in 2010, I'm hoping that there will be this sort of resurgence of it or
Mhm.
cult classic because they are few and far between. Even though there's a lot more available in terms of like an LGBT catalog or the drag queen films, and it's still pretty thin,
Right.
overall. And I feel like there's definitely a room, especially in the horror genre, for more of this. I would watch another horror movie with this, with even if there's less humor and more just straight of the horror, I'd still watch it.
Mhm.
I'd still be like, if it's done well.
Right.
And yeah, low but like and but that's part of the joy, and I think you will feel very strongly about this. With low budget movies, part of the joy is when they are good. Or it's like when we watch made for TV movies on Lifetime. When they're actually pretty good, it's like a the frosting on top, or it's like, oh, it actually was good. Like,
Yeah.
yes, yes, and I feel like that's how when I started this movie, I was like, man, it better live up to that title because that is a good title, and if it doesn't, I'm gonna be pissed. And instead, I was very, very pleased with it, and I couldn't say anything more about it than I just loved it. And I'm so glad that you did. Like, I'm so glad that you did.
I'm seriously, this is automatically one of my favorite movies now. I have to show it to people. They like I feel like whenever I'm feeling down, I have to watch it, or even just, it's like a feel good movie. And I know that sounds like weird, but it's just kind of like it's the dialogue, it's the characters, it's just like everything all around. I love it. I loved it. And it's like I know that it's kind of like it's been 10 years, but you know what? I think that there should be a sequel.
Oh, I
No?
definitely think there should be a sequel. I think there could. This is the type of movie that would have like five sequels that I think would
Yeah.
all be good. Different, so even if it's not the same cast,
Right.
different sort of scenarios, or even if it is the same cast, I mean, I don't. Well, again, without giving too many spoilers away, I think that after the climactic events of the film, some people aren't coming back. But like, I mean, it's not like even though 10 years have gone by, we're clearly still facing so much of this strife and hate in the
Yes.
world. I'm sure that even if we did have the same cast of women, that they could be mistreated again. I'm sure
Mhm.
it happened. Like, I'm sure that they got together, have a couple drinks. I'm sure a week later they heard some douchey comment from
Absolutely.
somebody out there, and that's part of what I think the drag queen persona is. It's like you have to have that bite
Hmm.
because you're putting up that wall because you know that just by being yourself, you are going to be hated. And it sucks. That sucks that that's the way it is. But it is still for now. And I guess I don't want to end. I don't want to end on a sad note, but it is kind of sad that 10 years have gone by. And even though 10 years ago we had a movie like Ticked-Off Trannies come out, we still are having the same fight, the
Right.
same bigoted conversations. I mean, look at the character of what's the bad guy's name? I had it right
Butler.
here. Boner, which is so, yes, of course. But like, look at the things he's saying. Like, he's basically like, well, yeah, I took you home and drugged you because I thought you were a woman. Like, okay, that's a horrifying thing to say. And then he's like, oh, and then when I found out you were a guy, well, you look so good. I mean, if you're a guy, I still had to rape you. Like, that's a mentality, though,
Yeah.
that exists. He is not, of all the characters, he comes off almost the most over the top, but he's
Right.
not because that character exists. That is
Hmm.
not a larger than life character. He thinks that he is sort of the Casanova of his
Right.
friends. And obviously, but that is sort of how like this domino effect happens, where he does have his cronies that like live on his every word, even though he's basically admitted without admitting it that he was attracted to a guy as if they would judge him as cronies. They're
Hmm.
clearly like, yeah, of course you had to, meaning then that they also could be attracted to guys.
Right.
And yet, like, they, because of this sort of hyper masculine patriarchal foundation society that we live in, yeah, of course they can't admit it. And so for them, the acceptable thing is to try and kill these women.
Right.
And that is the world we live in, and it's nuts.
Fortunately, and it is, and it's just like something I was even thinking, like with the you know the women in this. It's like I feel like they are well dressed. I just feel like they just look fabulous, and it's just like even with Bubbles, I feel like she's a damsel in distress, but she's like the sensitive one, where it's like you just want to protect her and everything. And when you first see her and you see that she has like a black eye, and it's like, you kind of like, what happened? And, like you kind of feel like that's your friend. So it's just,
which is why I think it's so effective. The whole warehouse sequence is, you do feel like, okay, run, and then, burst through that like gated window. Yes, run, and you want her to just leave, but you understand too why it's like, you're like, just get in the car and go. But at the same time, you're like, I know why you're not leaving. Your friend's behind. And, but again, that's the mark of a good movie, is when you get frustrated for the characters, but you also like understand why they do what they do. And, but yeah, I think that, but it's not, and I want to be clear, like, nothing about this movie. I think that they try to make a point, but I don't think it's preachy. I don't think that they're trying to like, I think they're just saying, hey, this situation could very well happen. While the front half of the film, hey, maybe even the second half of the film could very well happen. Maybe there's a lesson to be learned, like, hey, in this world, you got to learn how to kick some butt. But like, I do think that the initial setup scenario could very well happen. And so they're kind of like, all right, if this happened, then maybe even if it's just in a cinematic universe, we can fight back and win. And I think that's a pretty cool message. And not in a corny way. I think that it's genuinely, that's the kind of film I want to watch. And in my experience, unless it's like a very, very big budgeted film, most low budget films, whether, I used to love in the late 90s, which is how I actually watched a lot of LGBT movies. I loved getting independent movies from my video store, or it was always in the independent video section, like just very low budget films, but they're the ones that I always thought had the biggest impact. And I think that, this definitely fits in that, like, because it's under the radar and not being like released by a studio, it can actually say what it wants to say.
I agree. Like, well said.
Sorry, I do go off on tangents when I get like, I didn't expect to either. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, here I go.
No.
Was there anything else that you kind of want to talk about it?
Well, I was curious to know, did you have like a favorite scene?
I have many favorite scenes, but I think like when I'm watching the movie, that is a hard question, Zena, because when I'm watching the movie, I love the opening exchange, but I love also when they're at the club. What I feel like I want to say is the whole nurse sequence when they're in the hospital. I feel like that's my favorite, just because you now know the movie's on its tracks, you know where it's going to go, but like the sort of dialogue exchange between Rachel and Pinky before they go into the room, and then the reveal that Bubbles now has a lisp, and all that, like, just like, that now you're like, okay, it started funny, some horrifying things happened, but you're like, okay, so I know what the balance of this film is going to be. And like the flirting shamelessly with the doctor, the actual, one of the only actual, like, well, I was gonna say he's one of the actual only male characters in the film, but no, there's a few. One of the few non-weird ones, but even he's kind of weird. It's part of the humor. What about you? What would you say is your favorite film or favorite scene from the film?
I really love which we talked about, that when they're at the club, like that one really made me laugh. And I also like the scene too with the doctor, but I think it was Pinky when they found out it was like his name was like Dr. Phil, and she was just like, oh, is he gonna fill me up? And it's just, it's just like, what is wrong with you? But no, I mean, it was just so much fun. So
yeah. I mean, it's literally a bunch of fun, a fun string of scenes put together, and it makes a coherent movie. And yeah, like I said, like we were just saying, it's hard to pick, because when you're sitting there, the opening scene, you're like, oh, this is it. I feel like I'm going to like this movie. And then each subsequent scene, it's basically like, oh, I did. Like, I'm glad I stayed to watch it, like it's that good.
Like seriously, thank you again, just for recommending this movie. I'm so happy that we finally got a chance to talk about it. I would love to watch more movies like this because I just had like such a good time with it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for giving it a shot. I'm so glad we watched it. Well, thanks everybody for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Have you seen Ticked-Off Trannies with Knives, and who is your favorite drag queen? What are some of your favorite drag queen movies, and do you think drag queens should be a little bit more centered in horror movies? Thank you, Zena Dixon, for joining me tonight. You can find Zena under her RealQueenOfHorror.com moniker, under also Real Queen of Horror on YouTube, or you can find her on Wicked Horror. And I'm Justin Steele. You can also find me under Wicked Horror, 411 Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. Thanks, Zena, for joining me. I'm so glad we got to talk about Ticked-Off Trannies with Knives.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see you all soon. Thank you.